will listen by delayed broadcast, we also appreciate you as well. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And I believe we have the live broadcast up and running now. I mean, this simulcast going on Google Hangout, and I think everything's okay. I think I need to adjust the lighting here a little bit. So we're working on that. I have to turn my computer a different way, see if we can make this a little bit better than what we have. The sun is shining really bright outside. It looks like a beautiful day, and I've got to get outside and get some of that beautiful sunshine, especially after some of the cold and snow that we've had here in the city of Memphis. But we're looking forward to getting out and just kind of enjoying the day. It's a very beautiful day today. All right, well, another opportunity for us to study the Word of God. We're looking at these 7 prophetic signs and prophecies regarding the last days that help us to identify the last days. A lot of people believe that we are currently in the last days. Good morning to you, Heavenly Skies. Good to see you. And I certainly have enjoyed having conversations with you. Those of you who tune in, whether it's via Facebook. And June, as we talked yesterday, had a very good conversation. Let's see. The link I didn't get. I looked for it, and I have to look to see which email address you may have sent that to, but I don't recall seeing it. I looked for it, and I don't know if you sent it to my Facebook page, but I haven't discovered it yet. So I will look again, especially since now it's confirmed that you did send it, and I believe that you did. I just didn't find it, and I have several email addresses, so sometimes I have to check to see which one it has come to, but I will take a look. And because I'm interested in getting that information. I wanted to share something with you that I ran across. I wish I had it yesterday. And some of you may be familiar with this person. I'm going to see if I can play it. It's a YouTube video. Oh, you're very welcome, Robert. But that is definitely the case. It looks, I mean, we've been taught all our lives that it was for his first coming. But when you study the prophecies and look at what they say and when they're applied, it was for the parousia that those prophecies are focused on. Even the one that, from Isaiah 40, where he talks about, making the crooked places straight and leveling out the mountains and all of that. All of that is military language for fighting against one's enemies, etc. And so it's all related to the time of the end. And but just look at the prophecies a lot more closely, as we were examining yesterday, and you will see that that is the case. And it's one of the very much overlooked concepts about the mission and work of John the Baptist. Hello, Waitanya, how are you doing? Good to see you as well. And thanks for coming in. As I was saying, I have a video clip that I want to play that relates to the lesson. And I think you'll find it a little bit humorous. Okay, all right. You can just send it to williambelljr@gmail.com. I'll type it in for you so you'll have it. And I'll get it, but thanks for sending yours as well. Okay, so let's see if we can get this video clip up. I have to do some screen sharing here. And I'm going to take it and place it here, and let's see, we need to get the volume up a little bit so we can hear it. And then let me do some screen sharing. Let's see. Don't know how this is going to work, but I don't see it in my window. Let's see if we do the entire screen. I don't think that's what I want to do. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure that I can get this clip out here for you. And if not, we just won't have to listen to it. But if it's an application, let's see, Google Hangouts, that's 1.5. Oh, here we go. I have to scroll down. There we go. Okay, now it makes sense to me. Okay. Let's try this. And I don't know which one of these you're seeing. So you'll have to talk to me a little bit so I can see if you are able to see this screen. Now, can you see the screen that says Exploits TV, the YouTube video? Are you able to see this one? So if you can see this particular screen, let me know. I've got a YouTube video up that says Exploits TV. And I know those of you who are on the air, yes, 40 Signs video, absolutely. Heavenly Skies, have you watched this one? I'm just curious, have any of you, or has any of you watched it? Anybody watch this video? Well, let's take a quick look. I'm going to play it, and hopefully you will be able to hear it. I've got the volume up rather loud. Okay.
Hello, I'm Christine Darg. Get ready in the next few minutes as I'll be going through the top 40 signs in the Bible predicted to indicate the second coming of Jesus. Sign number 1 was mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, and verse 33, that many false prophets and false teachers will introduce heresies, and they will unfortunately cause many persons to reject the truth of this Word of God. Today, because of the influence and media attention given to pop atheists and false teachers, tragically, many people are simply brainwashed into rejecting the Bible out of hand. It's the case of the old adage that if you hear a lie often enough, you'll begin to believe it. There's a proliferation of religious leaders who are only out for themselves. They'll say anything that sounds good to exploit you. Of course, they'll come to a bad end because God just never stands by and lets that kind of thing go on. Now, the second sign of the coming of the Lord is that Jesus' great commission in the New Testament predicted that the good news of forgiveness of sins and salvation through Jesus the Messiah will be preached as a witness to all nations. Did you know that the Bible, or portions of this Bible, have been translated into over 2,400 languages and dialects? That covers over 90% of the world's population. And through radio and television, the gospel is being preached and over the internet to all nations. That's why satellites are often referred to as angels. In the last book of the Bible, in Revelation chapter 14 and verse 6, John prophesied, "Then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those on earth who live, and to every nation, tribe, language, and people."
Okay, I thought that was interesting. Of course, she's got 38 more to go, and I haven't listened to all of them. The one where she says that satellites are angels. Oh yeah, it's very difficult to watch when you hear that. But I just wanted to present that, and you look in the background, and you see a picture of Jerusalem in the background. You got this Israel backset, so you can tell they're coming from a Zionist perspective. I suppose Christian Zionists. Now, I haven't run across this lady before, but I would think that that's what's going on. And her channel is called the Jerusalem Channel. But this is what's happening to the churches. I mean, infiltrated. Oh yes, there's no doubt about that. I can see that very clearly. I mean, who else is going to, make that the backdrop of their videos if they weren't really supportive of Israel? But as you say, she's a financial supporter of Israel. But at any rate, this is what you have, and you have to think about this. And I, read this information that you don't only have people who are, you might say, Zionists, Christian Zionists, etc., or claiming to be Jews, Zionists, I should say, claiming to be Jews. But it's got to be the case that you have Zionists claiming to be Christians as well, which means that, or you can imagine, what's going on in some of these churches. And the information that they're getting, it's just absolutely amazing. But, she talked about false teachers. You could make that one of the signs. It's certainly one that's in Matthew. And the Bible talks about it in the last days, that these false teachers would come. Let's see. I did everything but got my Bible this morning. Sorry, Paul, I didn't follow my list. But you have that as a sign. And, and notice how shallow the support. She just makes the statements and then goes to the next as though it's true, and just makes this sweeping statement. Well, the Bible says, etc. But she doesn't give any proof of what she's talking about. She just makes the blanket statement, and people who have just a very shallow knowledge of the Bible, you hear that and you say, yeah, I've read that in the Bible, so that must be true. Oh, cool. But did you notice how many views she has? And I find that interesting too, that these people can be saying nothing for the most part, and their videos get hundreds of thousands of views. Then you have other videos that get a few hundred views. I've even done some videos where some people have made comments and wondered why they didn't get, 100,000 views based on what's there. And I know people have got to be watching these videos. I'm not saying I'm that interesting a guy to listen to, but at the same time, for what information is out there, oh yes, anything from that perspective gets a ton of views, and it's just just amazing. Which is why we have to continue to do Oh, her program is on Christian television in the UK. You know, I've thought about doing some TV work myself. I had started to check into it to see what it would take to get on a local channel. You know, I used to be like I was telling June on yesterday, I think when I first got on YouTube, I was a little hesitant to do it. I think I was one of the first. You know, I encouraged Don to get on. Took him a while before he got on, but I was thinking about it, and I said, you know, well, I see all of these, you know, just kind of crazy people on television. Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. And I said, well, you know, why not consider that? But I'll look into it and see if there's some economical way to do it. Maybe not now, but down the road, because, you know, we need to continue to share this message and expose the error everywhere we can possibly find. And, you know, a lot of people find themselves glued to television sets all the time. But you have in 1 Timothy 4 and also in 2 Timothy 3, prophecies regarding the last days and false teachers. And so, and of course, you got the the prophecy in 2 Peter chapter 2. Now here's one. You know, she's projecting this, and I know all of you know this, but there are other people out there who might stumble across this video who know her and will not understand how she has, you know, taken this gigantic leap of logic and skipped all the way out of the Bible from the 1st century down to the 21st century to teach that the false teachers are a sign of an imminent end. Well, if that were the case, she would be one of them, if it were future today. But at any rate, the Bible says in 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 1, but there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you, taking the audience relevance point of view or perspective, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. Now here's Peter telling a 1st century audience, as there were false prophets among the people of old, he says, there would likewise be false prophets among you. And many would follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. By covetousness, they will exploit you with deceptive words. And I think she had a title up there called Exploit TV, of all things. And I thought to myself, yeah, it is quite a bit of exploitation that's going on there. By covetousness, they will exploit you with deceptive words for a long time. Now, remember, I think, you know, as I said, I teach this stuff so much, I have to remember when and what. But I was talking about 2 Peter from Deuteronomy. I think we were talking about that yesterday. And looking at the prophecy, when we introduced the last days in Deuteronomy, when he talked about storing up the judgment of God, well, this is one of the statements that Peter makes, which refers back to Deuteronomy 32, when he says, excuse me, for a long time their judgment has not been idle, and their destruction does not slumber. And then in chapter 3, he actually refers exactly to the judgment that had been stored up, but showing you that these things were for the generation that lived in the 1st century. So any of these statements about false teachers, whether you find them in Matthew 24 or 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, all refer to things that were current in the times of the apostles. And yet people take them out of the 1st century and place them down into our time as though they are a current sign for today. And without listening to all of her video, I mean, she's going to do the same thing over and over and over again. I think more than anything, you know, if I do listen to the rest of it, I will just listen for the humor of it, just to see, you know, some of the things. I mean, early on, when I started to teach covenant eschatology, you know, people were saying the way the gospel was going to be preached to all the world was through satellites. And however, this is the first time I've ever heard anyone say that the satellites are angels. Now that is a stretch. The satellite is an angel. So just never ceases to amaze me what people say. Well, let's get to our lesson today. Just thought I'd, share that little bit with you concerning the time of these 40 signs, rather, that she is giving, and I'm sure some of them she has to make up in some kind of way. But when you have a moment, if you haven't listened to it and you want to do it, I'm like some people, it's hard for me to listen, but I have to listen to some of this stuff at times because I have to know what people are saying, and it gives an opportunity to further explain or teach the truth and to show and compare what the Bible does say against what they're saying. I found to be an effective way of teaching. So we talked about the coming of Elijah on yesterday and demonstrated that that was John the Baptist. We looked at worldwide evangelism, and that's why I went through all of those 5 words that talk about it, so that when you find people like this lady, Christine Dard, speaking of the gospel, the preaching of the gospel to all the world, as yet being a sign, you can see how far off or far away they are from the truth. Every aspect related to the preaching of the gospel was demonstrated directly from the scriptures and already completed within the first century generation, before 70 AD, of which it was a sign for the coming which occurred in that time. Then we have the abomination of desolation. Yeah, it'll be good entertainment for you. Just do it when you got some time and relax, and take them in short bites. Watch 3 or 4 of them and then go do something else so it doesn't make you crazy, and then come back and watch the others. So I think I got through maybe 6 or 7 of them last night, and I'll go back and listen to some of the rest, as you say, just to see them. I'm sure, yeah, they have a base. And some of you on this call are very, very informed about Zionism. And if you are not, you should do some study on that. If you haven't read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, or I think that's the name of it, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, you should read that. There's plenty of material out there. There are a lot of good YouTube videos that are out there which expose it, but at least you should be familiar with it and have a good, working knowledge and understanding of it. Some of you are just exceptionally informed, and I find that to be very, very encouraging, and to know that people are really seeing what's going on behind the curtain of a lot of things that happen in this world. So just makes the message that we have all the more important when you think about it. But this next sign is the abomination of desolation, which is mentioned in Matthew 24. It is one of the reasons why dispensationalists, for example, have just a strong disinclination to allow Matthew 24 to be used as a preterist text. They have a tremendous inconsistency between Matthew 23 and Matthew 24, where they admit and acknowledge that Matthew 23 is a reference to the first century generation. They look at the word generation in Matthew 23 and verse 36 and say Jesus meant the first century generation, and that he was talking about things that pertain to the temple, etc. And then, however, when they get to chapter 24 and they read this generation in verse 34, it does not mean the same thing, because once they admit that, they know that the game is over. And they've pretty much said the same thing in their debates. There was a debate between I think I've mentioned it before, Kenneth Gentry and Thomas Ice, where that became an issue. But I think there was another debate between Gary DeMar and Thomas Ice, where it became an issue. The word this generation became an issue, and Gary DeMar pressed Thomas Ice on that point in terms of verse 36. Dunn, I'm sure, did the same thing in their debate with him. I just can't remember going over it, and I actually attended the debate. But at any rate, that's one of the issues. And so when they look at this, they're going to dualize everything. They're going to separate the information in Matthew 24 to a large degree from Luke chapter 21, and claim that, you know, Luke 21 is 70 AD, but Matthew 24 is some future time. And one of the prophecies that they want to take out of the first century time frame, and you probably see when, you know, the young man G Consciousness is in, you know, whenever he visits our hangout, he's one of the ones who does this, and of course it just shows, you know, one of the inconsistencies that he has. But in verse 15, right after we have this sign of the worldwide evangelism that was spoken of, it says in verse 15, therefore, when you see, so we are dealing with audience relevance. And, you know, these terms, you know, as simple as it is, when we talk about audience relevance, some of the people out there have never heard that. They've never considered it. And you know that you're communicating when your opponents begin to use your terminology. They begin to use the terminology out of preterism to talk about some of these things. So once they get the concept, it's there and they can't overlook it. And I've actually heard some of these dispensationalists use the term audience relevance when they're talking about things. And I know they picked that up from the preterists, because we've been the only ones who've been using that concept and that term, as far as I know. But I mean, it's just a basic hermeneutic principle of understanding the Bible, knowing who's speaking. You know, those are some of the first things that you're told, to understand who's speaking, to whom is the speaking done, and about whom or what are they speaking. Well, those are just three fundamental questions you want to answer when you're studying the Bible. And of course, you know, when you look at that and you see the word you, then you have to identify who is referred to when he says you. Well, that would be the people in the first century, and particularly, oh yes, who, when, where, all of the five questions of inquiry will definitely give you what you need to understand. And we're covering some of that on our How to Study the Bible series and the Two Guys in the Bible broadcast on Tuesdays. But yes, who, where, when, how, and why, and what as well. But that's what you want to know primarily when you approach any text. But people have been so prone to read themselves into a text that they just go blind when you talk about who it's speaking to, or they assume that if something wasn't written directly to them, and that's about true as well, that if something wasn't written directly to them, and this is huge in terms of how they view things, they feel that they are lost or left out or have no hope. And I think I had a conversation about that as well, but that's what comes up often. Well, if the Bible was written to them, then we have no hope. Where is the hope? You know, and so they make a false argument on that as well. But that's generally what happens. So he says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. So he describes the abomination of desolation, and then the actions that they are to take, that the saints, the believers were to take when they saw the abomination of desolation. And, you know, the immediate audience here is Peter, James, John, and Andrew in terms of, you know, who's here, but of course, applying to them and to all of the disciples of Christ in terms of the instructions that he's giving. So he tells them when they see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. And so he refers back to the prophecy of Daniel, showing that Daniel had spoken of these things. And he said it would be standing in the holy place, which means that this is something that occurs in the Jewish temple, in the temple that was existing in 70 AD. And as a result of understanding that, we get into these dual prophecy concepts that, okay, yeah, we know something happened in 70 AD, or as we say with some, a total outright denial that they did. This is why a third temple will be built, so this can take place. The biggest thing is those in Judea run. I saw that as a futurist, made me think, okay, I'm good over here to say the least, but they ignore all that. That's correct. And that was a point that I was going to make, but thank you for bringing it up. He tells them, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Well, that's where the temple was located, right? I mean, it's in Jerusalem, which is in Judea. So that's a very key point, that they would see this abomination of desolation. Now, a lot of people believe, and it doesn't, for the sake of the argument itself, in terms of the actual time frame, it doesn't matter as much. I do think it matters. But, you know, some people will say, well, the abomination of desolation was the Romans. But I tend to think that the abomination of desolation was something caused by Israel. And one of the reasons for that is Israel was always responsible for the abominations that were created or committed in the temple, or among them that created that became the cause for their destruction. When you look in Ezekiel, for example, you have a similar situation to what's being described here. If you turn to Ezekiel chapter 8, and we'll read a few points from Ezekiel 8. And let's see if I'm in the right place. Yes, Ezekiel, the 8th chapter. Starting around verse 3, all right? Ezekiel 8 and 3 says, he stretched out the form of a hand, took me by a lock of my hair, and the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven and brought me in visions of God to Jerusalem, to the door of the north gate of the inner court, where the seat of the image of jealousy was, which provokes to jealousy. Now, you can kind of think back to Deuteronomy 32 again, where Moses talked about Israel was going to provoke God to jealousy. That's not the ultimate fulfillment of it, but that is one example of the fulfillment. As I was speaking yesterday, you can find this in reference to the Assyrian invasion. You can find it with the Babylonian invasion, etc. But he says, and behold, the glory of God, of the God of Israel, was there, like the vision that I saw in the plain. Then he said to me, Son of man, lift up your eyes now toward the north. So I lifted my eyes toward the north, and there, north of the altar gate, was this image of jealousy in the entrance. Furthermore, he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The great abominations that the house of Israel commits here, to make me go far away from my sanctuary. Now turn again, you will see greater abominations. That's correct, Andy. I believe that's exactly what it was all about. So he brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, there was a hole in the wall. And then he said to me, Son of man, dig into the wall. And when I dug into the wall, there was a door. And he said to me, go in and see the wicked abominations which they are doing there. So I went in and saw, and there every sort of creeping thing, abominations, beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel, portrayed all around the walls. And there stood before them 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel, and in their midst stood Jaazaniah, the son of Shaphan. Each man had a censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. Then he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel do in the dark? Every man in the room of his idols, for they say, the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. And he said to me, turn again, and you will see greater abominations that they are doing. So he brought me to the door of the north gate of the Lord's house. And to my dismay, women were sitting there weeping for Tammuz. Then he said to me, have you seen this, O son of man? Turn again, you will see greater abominations than these. So he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house, and there at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, and they were worshiping the sun toward the east. And he said to me, have you seen this, O son of man? Is it a trivial thing to the house of Judah to commit the abominations which they commit here? For they have filled the land with violence. Then they have returned to provoke me to anger. Indeed, they put the branch to their nose. Therefore I will act in fury. My eye will not spare, nor will I have pity, though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, I will not hear them. And of course, if you read chapter 9, you will find where they were to seal the righteous ones and destroy those who were marked out for destruction. So in this case, with the destruction of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, the cause of it was the abominations that were committed by Israel. In other words, Israel provoking God to jealousy. And from that sense, you could say this was the bride of Christ who became a spiritual harlot and was doing these things that were provoking him to jealousy. Isaiah talks about it, and other prophets speak about it, but there you have an example that it was Israel doing this. Now, if you go to the book of Revelation and look in Revelation 17, you have Mystery Babylon. But one of the things that's said about Mystery Babylon, starting in we'll just read verse 4 and 5. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and of the abominations of the earth. Now, in further identification of this woman, he says, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. Now, this will take you right back to Matthew 23, where we were starting on this, where Jesus is talking about those in his generation. But he says, because they shed the blood of the saints, that they were told to fill up the cup of their iniquity. Fill up this cup where you are continuing in the sins of your fathers who murdered the prophets. Behold, I'm going to send to you wise men, scribes, and prophets. Some of them you're going to persecute from city to city. You're going to crucify. You're going to scourge in your synagogues, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. So not only were they going to be responsible because they were committing the same actions that their fathers had done, but he says, I'm going to send you these wise men, prophets, and scribes, and you're going to prove and demonstrate that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets, because you're going to do the same thing that they did. Remember when Jesus talked to the Jews in John chapter 8, and they took up stones to stone him, and they had been claiming that they were the sons of Abraham, and he told them, he says, you seek to kill me. This Abraham did not do. And they were proving that they were not children of Abraham because they were not doing the deeds of Abraham. He said, if Abraham were your father, you would do the deeds of Abraham. You're trying to stone me. Abraham didn't do that. Well, in like manner, they were doing the deeds of their fathers because they were going to stone some of the disciples. They were going to crucify them and persecute them from city to city, which were actions that Abraham did not take against God or his people. Abraham was a defender of the people of God, whereas these were those who were destroyers of them. And so the mother of harlots here, of course, is Jerusalem. So that tells you that they were committing abominations, and this is why they were being judged. Revelation 11 and verse 8, when he talks about the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So that identifies Jerusalem as the one who committed these abominations. And of course, as Andy has already indicated, these zealots who were in Jerusalem, who profaned the temple, who were slaying people in the temple, they even tried to persuade them against doing it. And they still did these atrocious acts in the temple, and just had blood, and violence all over the place, committing these abominations. And it was for those reasons and others that God brought this tremendous judgment against the Jews. So the abomination of desolation is one of those signs. It took place in connection with the temple that was then existing in Jerusalem. So you cannot talk about a temple. We don't have the setting for the fulfillment of the abomination of desolation today to take place in the most holy place or in the holy place. You do not have that temple existing today. And this is why they're saying we got to have another temple. See, their end time program cannot take place because you don't have all the props, if you please. You don't have everything to make that happen. You don't have the historical setting and time frame for these things to occur. You don't have the temple. You don't have first century Israel. You don't have a possibility for the abomination of desolation to be committed in the temple, and you don't have the Roman Empire to send their armies to destroy them, to be used as agents of the wrath of God. This is why people are telling you the Roman Empire is coming back. The temple is going to be rebuilt. We got to reestablish the law and all of these things so we can do again what already happened in the Bible, or attempt to do it, because they cannot do it. But that's what's going on. And this is why we're talking about these signs, so you can see that these things were actually fulfilled in the first century. And it's not going to, as you say, they want history to repeat itself, but it's not going to repeat itself. There is just no way that it's going to happen. And that's what I was referring to on yesterday, when I said every time they think they have a scenario close to or similar, because they're not close. I mean, they try to, they will make things fit. If they get anything that appears to be like it might refer to a Bible prophecy, then they will do everything they can to embellish it, to fix it up, and say this is Bible prophecy. They did that with the European Union, and of course, look how that turned out. And So it didn't work, and they go off looking for something else, and they're going to continue to do that over and over again. And some people are never going to be the wiser for it. They're just going to keep believing it over and over again. I mean, how many times can people tell you something and it fails, and then you continue to believe it? You know, that's insanity, but yet, you know, it happens. So the abomination of desolation is one of those signs. And of course, you know, Daniel had limited it to the 70 weeks, which again would take you to 70 AD. And some of these dispensationalists understand Daniel 9 and Daniel 12 to be referring to 70 AD. And yet, when it speaks of the abomination of desolation, in Matthew 24, they claim this is not. And yet, here is the Lord telling you very specifically, these things were spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And so we have no doubt that that is what is being referred to in this particular case. Now, a very similar sign and related would be the man of sin that you find in 2 Thessalonians. It's got some very similar points to this one. And so if we look in 2 Thessalonians, you have the prophecy concerning the man of lawlessness or the man of sin. And the Bible says in verse 1, and we had some questions about this, and I'm discussing this with someone now. We're looking into this. You can choose to either love in peace with the Lord or in fear with lies. I have so much peace now, not searching news anymore. Yeah, and we underestimate the number of people out there who are searching for answers about these things. Even people who would not consider themselves Bible students per se want to know. I've talked to people in business who are concerned about the end of the world and various events that they consider the last, to relate to the last days. Collectively, the mindset that people have will affect their perspective on the future and what they're capable of doing. As I've said, in these broadcasts, there are some people who refuse to get married, who refuse to get a college education. And I'm sure you've probably got some additional ideas. They refuse to study science, technology, math, and anything that pertains to the future. Ask themselves, why save for the future when we know all of this will no longer exist? And so they're in a wait and see mode. They're in a hold mode. They have their lives on hold because they're waiting for the end to come. And it's affecting their long-term perspective. One dispensationalist admitted that he constantly watches the news and puts them into the scriptures. That's exactly what they do. That is their method of interpretation. That's their hermeneutic. Watch the news and then look for something. You could do a search online, which is what I did yesterday when I pulled in that comment, that website that we read a few comments from. I just went, because you're always going to find that you can just type in prophecy news, prophecy update, etc. And you're going to find someone using some current event to talk about the end time. They're doing it with this decision, this UN decision of not to support Israel in their ongoing settlements. They're making something out of it. And they're going to make an end time scenario based upon that. They're going to try to create something that, if it persists, they're going to call it something and start, this end time rant about it. All people have to do is just pay attention to this a little bit. I used to watch a 24/7 live cam on the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. I was totally lost. I don't mean to laugh at that, Heavenly Skies, but I mean, and I know you have to be overjoyed and grateful that, you have come out of that type of bondage, in terms of, those beliefs. But there are so many people who have not. And what really is sad when you hear that some people lose their lives, their livelihood, and give up their careers and everything. As a matter of fact, I had a comment from a Hebrew Israelite who talked about he gave up so many good jobs because he was under the impression that he couldn't work on a Saturday. So if you don't think it's affecting you in a very practical way, you need to think again. Your eschatology and your worldview is having an impact on just about everything that's going on in this world. And it will continue to have an impact. All the way from the government, politics, their views about war, all of these things are related to these things. And, you've had presidents that believe that they're actually fulfilling Bible prophecy. And people who believe that supporting, and this is why, they're talking about these evangelicals who are in support of Israel. Look at how it has blinded them morally to just common human rights and decency. Israel above all else. They will support the gay agenda, murder, theft, you name it, all in the name of Israel. Things that if they were talking to the average person, they would abhor. But when you put Israel in the picture, you overlook all of that. It's like you cover your eyes with blindness, and all of that goes as the will of God. I work with the Jehovah's Witness who says that she won't have children because Jesus said, woe to those who are nursing children in those days. Wow. And I'm sure, there are probably all kinds of weird stories out there like that people have themselves trapped in bondage because of these eschatological views that affect their personal lives, their business lives, their social lives, their financial lives, and their political lives. I mean, it's just pervasive, which shows you how important this is. And we don't know a lot of times what people are being delivered from when they come into the knowledge of these truths. As like we couldn't know what happened to Heavenly Skies. We couldn't understand that. We couldn't understand what people are going through and what they're believing, what they have given up in their lives as a result of following some of these cultic-like views. But that's what's going on. And so it's very important. And for people who kind of sit on the sidelines, you keep wondering, should you, you become an accomplice in that. If you're hesitating and waiting, these people need to be delivered. They need some help. They need someone to show them the way. And so that's why it's important for all of us to teach and share information. That's why we're doing the videos. How much time does it take to copy a link of a video that you might think is applicable, and then share it and say, hey, watch this, and see, and just continue to share it. I was looking at our, I tell you, I occasionally promote these videos on YouTube. And so we were up to almost 2,000, and now the number is over 4,000, and it's still growing. So I try to do a little bit of promotion so that it reaches people that I may not ever have an opportunity. They may never come into a hangout, or they may be in listening as a result of having seen some of those things. I know I get direct responses from them all the time that they have shared the video, they like the video, etc. So they are watching them, and apparently some changes are being made. So let's see. Guilty as charged. Last year, I thought the same about children till I knew the truth. Okay. Wow. I mean, listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. Do you see how these things are affecting people's lives? Let's see. I was about deranged. A group of us would take turns for years at a time, go outside watching for signs of Jesus in the sky. No joke. I was in that for 4 months, then asked God to lead me and give me wisdom. Bless your heart. It's almost hard to imagine that if I didn't know that things like that actually occurred. And to know that, there are people in here who've actually gone through that and experienced that is it's really something. I mean, it just shows you how important this message is, how freeing it is. And I was looking for a better word, but that's all I could come up with. Liberating was the term that I was searching for. How liberating it is to people. And when you talk about the gospel giving you freedom, then this is it. Stand in the liberty where Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage, no matter what kind of yoke it is. It's just a beautiful thing to step into this kind of liberty and then see that. And, children, such a beautiful gift from God. And then to have us refuse when we either desire them and are capable of having them, refuse to do so because we've got a skewed belief. That's just not right. And if you go back and really study Israel and their views about having children, they saw themselves, their own lives extended through their children, and that a barren womb to them was like death. Or a child who died was like death. A child sold to the creditors was like death. That's how they saw themselves continuing on. This is why the law of levirate marriage was important, because they had to perpetuate the name of the deceased person. Otherwise, that person would be considered having no inheritance in the land, having no future, his name cut off, etc. The name continued through the children. Very important concepts in resurrection, that our over focus on a body coming out of the ground just hides us from seeing what was involved in Israel. And as I told you, I've been doing this research, and I just refuse. Well, it's not that I refuse. I went into the research trying to find out, did the Jews really have an expectation in the Hebrew scriptures of a body coming out of the ground as their resurrection hope? And so far, I'm not finding it. I told you the other day that Holger called me. I think I mentioned it to you. I might have mentioned it to some others that I was talking to. But Holger Neubauer, who I had on this show by phone one day, called me up and he says, William, he says, I've been searching the Old Testament. He says, I don't see where the Hebrews believed in a body coming out of the ground for their resurrection hope. You know, see, this is what people are saying about the Pharisees. The Pharisees believed in resurrection, and they are assuming that they believed in a body coming out of the ground. And I do not find that in the Hebrew scriptures. I'm not finished with the research, but I haven't found it. And according to the research, the earliest views about resurrection didn't happen until very late, as far as what they consider to be Second Temple Judaism. And the recent views about resurrection comes from Daniel 12. Well, I know that doesn't teach a bodily resurrection, a physical body. So I don't think the evidence is there, but you know, we'll wait and see where it's going. But what I'm saying to you before I got to that is this idea of producing children is directly related to resurrection in Israel, is directly related to death, and the way that they saw themselves continuing. And this is why they would see their inheritance, even when they passed on, they still considered their inheritance and their life through their children. Hard for us as Westerners probably to conceive, but for them, resurrection was relational. And they didn't see it as just a body coming out of the ground. They saw it more from a social and relational point of view, which is so appropriate when you understand that if you have a relationship with God, that means you've been raised from the dead. But sever that relationship and you're dead, covenantally speaking, and as far as that relationship is concerned. Once you get that, I think, when you start reading passages, it's like you're going to read them again for the first time. Scales will begin to fall off your eyes. You'll see so much opened up in Scripture. And I think let me just do this last point and I'll get back to what I was saying. But I think one of the most uninformed statements made in my debate with Brother Josh was when he said, resurrection has nothing to do with inheritance. And you see, inheritance is related to a son. And that whole teaching in Luke 20 and Matthew 22 on the resurrection was all about a son being born for the purpose of inheritance. It was just totally uninformed statement and false on top of it. But, you know, that took me way off to a degree. But yeah, this is real stuff. This is real, and it's affecting lives in ways that we don't even know, because I didn't know some of the things that you're saying right here in terms of how it affected you. If it's the truth of God and the wisdom of God, and it is, then it has to have all kinds of beautiful blessings encouched in it. And when we fail to understand it, then that means that we are losing out on all of those blessings. Let's see, in first century Judea, there was a high rate of child mortality, which is why children were so important. Okay, that's true too. Child mortality was one of the issues, but you know, barren wombs was another. We know that from early on. You know, and wait until you see the connections between the individuals and the nation. When you start seeing Sarah and her barren womb, Rachel and her barren womb, Hannah and her barren womb, and begin to look at all of that in connection with the big picture of eschatology. It's absolutely amazing. I almost can't wait to get into the material, but I got to finish the research and start to put it together where it makes where I can make it make sense to other people, or explain it in a way that it makes sense. Just absolutely important. Okay, regarding how to study, we were taught to get who is talking, who is being talked to, get the full context, etc. We were taught to get the background, etc. That's correct. But go ahead, Paul. I'm listening for you. Got me on a cliffhanger now. I was just wondering to see what else you were going to say. Okay, so that's very, very key to study all of those things. And it's amazing when you get the background of everything else, how that just throws, just a broad light, a bright light on the meaning of a text when you actually know what that context and what that history is from that perspective. So that's the abomination of desolation, but to the man of sin. So in 2 Thessalonians, oh yes, because we were so pushed to read ourselves into the text, and that still is the case today. If we could just correct those simple things, if we could just teach people those 5 or 6 questions, and I have on my wall, really, those questions about Bible study in my office at the building. I have a chart up there, or just a little sign with those very questions on it. But anyway, in verse 1, he says, "Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed." And, it can be inferred that the falling away is a result of false teaching. And maybe not totally, but certainly that has to be involved. Somebody leading them astray. That's what Paul said in Acts chapter 20, that there were those who would come and lead them astray. But at any rate, which again tells you the false teachers were in connection with the event that he's naming here related to the temple, because the temple is mentioned here. And so he says that day will not come unless the falling away comes first and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshiped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And so here we have this sign of the man of sin, called the son of perdition or the man of lawlessness, etc., that would be revealed in connection with and prior to or in connection with the coming of the Lord. But it was all related to activity that involved the temple, because it says, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called, or all that is called God, or that is worship, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. In other words, he's overthrowing the laws of God and making his own rule. And Paul tells them, he says, "Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things?" Now, why was Paul telling people in the first century about something that wouldn't occur until a time that is yet future to us? Let's go back to Miss Christine Darg. She's not giving 40 signs of something that has happened. She's giving 40 signs of something that is yet to happen. Of what real benefit was there to first century saints of a temple they would never see? They would never experience. They would have no clue what it would even look like. And yet they're told that this man of sin would be in that temple, and that they have to look for the coming of the Lord based on a temple that's not yet built, that would not exist for over 2,000 years, in order that they wouldn't be deceived. How much sense does that make? Let's see. Oh, I was just reading your comments there. So this is the problem we've got going on. This is what people are not thinking about. You've got some people, and see, there was another problem that was a backdrop to all of this. These people were being persecuted. Their lives were being threatened. Their homes were being threatened. Their jobs were being threatened. Families being threatened. All of this at the very time that this takes place. If you go and read from the first chapter of 2 Thessalonians, Paul said in verse 4 and following, so that we ourselves boast of you among the churches of God for your patience and faith. The word patience carries the idea of laboring under trial. It's not just waiting on something. In Paul's use of it, it was waiting while you are under duress, while there is some adverse circumstance going on in your life, like persecution. It's easy to tell people to just sit and wait when nothing's going on. You know, all they got to worry about is boredom, perhaps. But if somebody's beating on your head and you're told to be patient, that's a whole different scenario. And that's what he's basically saying to them. You got to endure and remain faithful in the midst of your persecution. And so he says, we ourselves boast of you among the churches of God for your patience and faith in all your persecutions. You see, patience in persecution, faith in persecution, and tribulations that you endure, which is manifest evidence of the righteous judgment of God, that you may be counted worthy of the kingdom of God, for which you also suffer. Since it is a righteous thing with God to repay with tribulation those who trouble you. Notice, God was going to repay the very ones who were persecuting the church. But now, what if that judgment has not occurred? Did Paul lie to them through the inspiration of the Spirit and tell them you're being beat on today, but we're going to deliver you in 2017 now? Weren't we supposed to have an end of the world back at the end of 2016? I thought I remembered somebody saying that. Anyway, it goes on and on and on and on. So think about that. Here are people being persecuted, being told to be patient and endure. and that God is going to repay those who persecute you, but it's not going to happen for the next 2,000 plus years. So you just be patient. So here they are, waiting and waiting and waiting, beat and beat and beat, and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then some die, and the rest are still waiting and waiting and waiting. Then some more die, and then eventually all of them die. Never to get any relief. That's a cruel God. That's a lying God, if that is what happened. 1,000 said the end would be 2016. Now they say January 20th. There is no reason or rhyme to the dates that they come up with. They just pick one. It's like gambling. You know, they put all the date balls in this deal and just spin it and let you pick one. That's about the way they do their eschatology. Since verse 6, it is a righteous thing with God to repay tribulation, or repay with tribulation those who trouble you. See, audience relevance again. Well, then if it's a righteous thing to repay with tribulation, it must be unrighteous not to pay. So if that tribulation has not yet happened, brother dispensationalist, whoever you are, then it was unrighteous for God to tell the Thessalonians who were undergoing persecution that they were going to be delivered when they weren't. They were going to receive respite from those persecutions when they were not. See, that's what happens when we try to put the tribulation off in the future. That God was going to repay for those who caused persecution and tribulation among the saints, and to give you who are troubled rest with us when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven with his mighty angels. Now, he's going to give them rest. Those who were being troubled were going to receive rest with us, with the apostles. So now we got to find the apostles to fit in this scenario. I wonder if the 40 signs lady has room for the apostles in her doctrine, in her 40 signs. When the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven with his mighty angels, those must be some mighty satellites in flaming fire, taking vengeance. See, there's Deuteronomy 32. There's that vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. Taking vengeance on those who know not God, on those who do not obey the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. These shall be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power when he comes in that day to be glorified in his saints and to be admired among all those who believe, because our testimony among you was believed. Now that's the background of what was taking place. Tribulation today for most is kissing their remote or phone and blaming it on the devil. That's good. All right. So this is the background of what was taking place during this time of the mystery of lawlessness. and the reason why God was going to destroy him with the brightness of his coming. But we have to keep that in its historical setting, in its historical context. And you have to read it from the perspective of audience relevance. To whom was that originally written? The text will not make sense, and you will have God becoming an unrighteous God. You will have people dead for thousands of years who got no relief in their lifetime, but were deceived into thinking they would. And if they did get relief, then that's telling you that was when the coming of the Lord was fulfilled. But this point on this lawless one, it was a sign for them in their day. He would sit in the temple, the one that existed at that time, and show himself to be God. And I believe that that was a Jewish power, and pretty much akin to the Zealots that committed this. Some people say it was the high priest. I'm slow to say that it was a single man. I know it says the man of lawlessness, but every time the Bible uses man, it doesn't use it in a individual sense. It can use it in a corporate sense. And so the man of sin could be opposite to the one new man, ultimately being Christ. You know, so if you say summed up in the high priest, I could see that, but I would still think that it's more than just an individual. And if you go back to Daniel, I hesitate to say that it could have been a Caesar. I don't think it was a Roman individual at all. I think it was Jewish, and if you look at some of the language, so that he, as God, sits in the temple showing himself that he is God. I don't think that that fits. And then it says that in verse 9, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders. I think that's describing someone or some entity within Israel. Now, let's look at something from Daniel chapter 7 for a moment. In Daniel 7, you have what is called the little horn, which clearly is not the Roman Empire. It rises up among the Roman Empire, but it is not the Roman Empire. Daniel 7, let's turn to around verses 7 and 8. All right, after he's seen these three beasts, which actually correspond to the metallic image of chapter 2. I think Daniel 7 is nothing but a recapitulation of Daniel 2. They both teach exactly the same thing. One just does it under a metal image in the image of a man, and the other does it with beasts. But notice in verse 7, after this, meaning after he saw the lion, which was Nebuchadnezzar, the bear, Medo-Persia, and the leopard, Greece, he says, after this in the night, visions, and behold, a fourth beast. Well, I take the fourth beast as Rome. Dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, there is some current study going on, and I'm looking at that study as well. But then in verse 8, it says, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn. Now, some people make this horn one of the 10 or part of the 10. They add it to the 10 and make 11 horns. I don't think that's what it's saying, but it says there was another horn, a little one coming up among them, before whom, that means in the presence of whom. Three of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. So you had the 10 horns and those 3 horns. The 10 horns were made up a composite beast. But then you have those 3 individual horns, and it says, in the presence of whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots, which means they were totally removed. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. Now, he watches till the thrones were put in place. But I'm going to skip that for a moment and go down to verse 21. Well, let's pick it back up at verse 17. The great beasts which are 4 kings which arise out of the earth, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I wish to know the truth of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron, its nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with its feet, and the 10 horns that were on its head, before which 3 fell. So the 3 are different from the 10 horns. They fell, but the 10 horns are still intact. Namely, that horn, which had eyes and a mouth which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was watching, and the same horn, that's that little horn, was making war against the saints and prevailing against them until the Ancient of Days came. So whomever this little horn was, he was making war against the saints and prevailed against the saints until the Ancient of Days came and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Now, look in verse 25. And well, you can look in verse 24. He reiterates that again. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. I still believe that's the little horn, and that the 3 are the first 3 horns. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall be seated, they shall take away his dominion. Then the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High, and his kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So I believe that this little horn that had eyes like a man and spoke blasphemous words against the Most High identifies with the man of sin in 2 Thessalonians. He is destroyed at the coming of the Lord, just like you see here. He was making war against the saints until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was given. In 2 Thessalonians, the little horn opposes and exalts all that is called God. But how and when is he destroyed? It says, the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to go back to verse 8. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and will destroy with the brightness of his coming. So this is something that gets destroyed at the coming of the Lord. It's an entity, whatever that is, that gets destroyed at the coming of the Lord that was making war against the saints. I think it's a Jewish element. I think it's primarily Israel. I don't think that's who it is, because, and I certainly don't think it is an individual. Remember what the text said in Daniel, before whom, or in the presence of whom, 3 of the first horns were plucked up. Was Galba, Otho, etc., were they living during the time of Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece, which were the first 3 horns of Daniel's prophecy? No. See, this little horn had survived all the way from Babylon down to 70 AD, the Roman Empire. Well, what other entity did that? What man did that? You can't put a man, you can't put a human individual in that position. This is not something that came about in the first century. This was something that was existing prior to that time. No, I don't believe it was Nero either, because Nero died before. Nero reigned from what, 54 to 68 AD. This entity is destroyed at the brightness of the Lord's coming. And so I don't think Nero fits the picture. Nero, again, see, that's the problem with trying to make it a man. You cannot find a man, a human being, that was living during the time of the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, and the Grecian Empire, and saw those 3 empires fall, then saw the 4th empire in its beginning rise up. A man will not work. An individual just doesn't work. So you got to find some entity, something that had an existence all the way from that time, saw all those 3 kingdoms fall, saw the Roman Empire begin, and yet was in existence, persecuting the saints, and then gets destroyed at the coming of the Lord. The only thing I know, the only entity I know that fits that bill was Israel. That little kingdom, Israel. I agree with you, Heavenly Skies. So the Sanhedrin was the little horn. I don't think the Sanhedrin was, I mean, they were the leaders, but the Sanhedrin wasn't the only ones doing the persecuting of the saints. Now, surely they started. You can see that in Acts chapter 4. But I don't think they were the only ones doing the persecuting. Paul was being persecuted all over. Yeah, that's a good point. Sun, moon, and stars. So, you know, I understand that the authority comes from the rulers. I mean, look at what Paul did. he went seeking authority from the chief priests and the elders for him to persecute. But he wasn't the only ones doing the persecuting. As he said, look in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 14. And notice what the text says. Now, I know you're familiar with this, but I'm just going to read it since it's a point of discussion. For you, brethren, became imitators of the churches of God, which are in Judea in Christ Jesus. For you also suffered the same things from your own countrymen, just as they did from the Judeans, who killed both the Lord Jesus and their own prophets, and have persecuted us, and they do not please God, and are contrary to all men, forbidding us to speak to the Gentiles that they may be saved, so as always to fill up the measure of their sins, but wrath has come upon them to the uttermost. I don't think he's just talking about the Sanhedrin or just the priests. I think the leadership, of course, is culpable, but I think that he's dealing with the entire nation, ruled by them for sure. But that's my view on it, and I've stuck to it over the years. I've heard pretty much the Nero theory. I've heard the Caesar theory. Pretty much all of them, but none of them, in my opinion, meet the criteria of the text that said it had to be, that points out those first three horns fell before, or fell in the presence of this little horn. So what man could fit that? I mean, do you know how many years that is from Daniel down to Revelation, down to the coming of the Lord? That's 600 years. I don't think we can find a man to fit that time frame. And if you talk about the beginning of the Babylonian Empire, in that context and seeing them fall, that's just not possible to make it a man. So it's an entity. And the only thing I can see that fits would be Israel. They spoke blasphemous words. And that times and a half time is key as well. Study that out in the book of Revelation and in Daniel 12:7. That's a key indicator as well in terms of what happened there. Let me take a look real quick. It's you find that in chapter 11 and 12 and 13, I believe. Now, take a look, for example, in Revelation 13 and verse 3. I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, who is able to make war with him? He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation, etc. I think that that language is similar to what we have in Daniel. Biggest key is destroyed at his coming. Only one nation fits the bill, Israel. I agree. That's one of the reasons that I hold to the point. And that is Jerusalem. That's very key. destroyed at his coming. And it had to be a nation that was persecuting the saints, that made war with them. And I think it's very clear who that nation was. The Romans were God's agent of wrath to destroy them. So I think all the evidence points to Jerusalem, and that's where I hang my hat. And until I see some convincing evidence that will change my mind, I'm going to stay there. And I've been there for at least a couple of decades or more. And so far, no one has convinced me to go otherwise. But those are my reasons for doing so. And I think if you consider the fact that it had to be some entity that was around and witnessed the fall of those three nations, the beginning of Rome, and at the same time existed until the coming of the Lord. And see, you certainly can't get a man living today. Let's go back to Christine Darg and her 40 signs. You cannot get a man who was in existence from that time and is still alive to this day. See, that'd even be a more far-fetched concept. It just doesn't make sense. But you'd have the same problem, just a shorter time period from the time of Daniel up until the destruction of Jerusalem. Okay, I always thought the 7 heads represented men or kings, horns represented individual men. As I told you before, I alluded to the fact that I'm studying that. I'm studying some by a gentleman who's doing some work on that. I'm not sure that that's what I accept, but some people have tried to make the 10 horns the 10 Caesars, starting with Julius. But see, that doesn't work because it's a composite beast. It's not consecutive horns, like one is here today, then the other one comes after that one is deposed, dethroned, killed, or whatever, and then the other one comes up. It's a 10-horn beast when it starts. It's a 10-horn beast in the vision. It never ceased to be a 10-horn beast, is my point. Oh, yeah. I mean, and I'm well aware of the fact that Nero, for a time persecuted the Christians or blamed that fire on Christians, etc. So I'm well aware of that. But that's why I said his reign was 54 to 68 AD, and he just doesn't fit the bill because the persecution is still going on after that time, and it doesn't cease. No, this persecution from Jerusalem ceased after the Jews were destroyed and carried into captivity, killed with the sword. They weren't around to persecuting the Christians from that point forward on the scale that they were. That can be challenged too, Simon. First of all, 666 it says it's the number of a man. The man of sin is a man. And then Holger Neubauer did some interesting study. I'm still looking at his study, but he did some pretty interesting work where he went back and looked at the number 666 used in the Old Testament. See, Holger's philosophy about study is similar to mine. We share some common ideas. Yes, that's the concept I was suggesting. We share some common ideas about our source for information. And I had a teacher in seminary who actually was the son-in-law of the guy who debated Max King, Gus Nichols, for Paul, and those who might have a Church of Christ background, you'll know who I'm talking about. But he was my instructor. And one of the things that he said, which I had already had that philosophy even going into the school, but he had this concept. He says, brethren, he says, before you ever pick up a book, just read the text. And I had a conversation with a very prominent preacher in Memphis some years ago when this happened, when all of this happened in Memphis, and I became, the shunned preacher, so to speak, in terms of what I taught regarding the coming of the Lord. But anyway, I sat down in his office one day, and he said to me, he says, I wish that you had come to me and spoke with me before this became known. And I said, well, I had made attempts to do so. He said, but I want to tell you something that happened to me when I was young, because he was older man than I was at the time. This was many years ago. And he said, he said, when I read the Bible, now this is what was interesting. And he told me this as sure as I'm sitting here today. He said, when I was younger, I read Matthew 24. And when I read the scriptures, it sounded as though it was saying that all of these things were already fulfilled. He said, but then I picked up a commentary, and the commentary said it was still future. So I had to abandon that idea that it was already fulfilled. I looked at him and I said, well, and I called his name. I said, unlike you, I did just the opposite. I read the commentary that said it was future. And then I read the Bible that said it was already fulfilled, and I put down the commentary. So I think that's an important point. And I'm not against books. I have them all around me. I got almost 360 books in here, at least in this room, and books on the wall in the next room. I'm not against books, because we all need somebody to help us and guide us on things that we don't know and don't understand. But I believe the Bible is its first and best interpreter. And so what Hoger's point is that he was going to go look in the Old Testament scriptures. Because isn't that what the Bible teaches us? Number one, it teaches us that eschatology is the fulfillment of the Old Testament scriptures. We've mentioned that point over and over again. And he felt that somewhere in inspiration, it would give us the knowledge or the meaning of this 666. So what he started doing was looking at every scripture in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that mentioned 666. And he came up with, and I would have to have him give you the details on it, but he started seeing 666 or something to that effect in things involving the priesthood and the temple. And all from, even to the number of the pillars that were in the tabernacle and everything. And this led him, yes, that as well, Heavenly Skies, you have an amazing recall and awareness and knowledge of these things. That led him to the conclusion that the beast, and of course his conclusion was that it was I think he said it was the high priest, but the point was he referred it to Old Covenant Israel. And that's been my position for the most part as well. That could be the case. I would suggest that you look at that source as well. But that's the approach that we generally take. And so that goes back to what I'm doing now as I'm studying on the, trying to figure out what the Hebrews believed. People are going to the Apocrypha and other books like that, trying to say this is what they believed. And I don't see it there, to be quite frank with you. But then when you investigate these Old Testament scriptures and look at them, they're painting a different picture. And so what I'm trying to do is to develop my understanding solely from the scriptures, as opposed to, here's somebody that said, this is what they said. And even there's a quote in Josephus, I'm off that topic and back to the other topic for a moment here. the statement that is made where they claim that physical resurrection was taught in the Old Testament scriptures, they interpret Josephus's statement because it really doesn't say that when you read it. But anyway, that was just a quick diversion. So that's what I believe about the man of sin. And but the point remains. Okay, and see, that would even make sense too if it's found in the Talmud and they call that 666. Well, see, there were a lot of things that could add up to 666. There's even some that say the numbers could be 616. So I think it's, we have to really, before we settle in on that, we got to really add all this other evidence together. But I feel more confident looking at it relating to something that was of Israel than to call it Nero. That's just my point of view. And one day we'll get it. Maybe I'll invite Holger here to have him just do his presentation on Revelation 13 and let you see how he walks through the process to get where he is. And he's pretty confident about it. Like I said, it was interesting study. And he turned over every text in the Old Testament that had it. So where can we find a preterist commentary? Could this be your next big project? Could we do it together? I tell you what, that's an awesome request. It's a humbling request. I don't know that I'm capable of doing that. I would certainly be willing to contribute what I could to it. That sounds like a Don Preston project. And I think at one time, Jack Scott, no, he was going to do one before he became a preterist. He was going to do something on Matthew 24 or the book. He was going to write a commentary on Matthew, on the book of Matthew. I would certainly need to be in a position where I could dedicate the work and the research to doing that. But I'd love to work on that as a collaborative project. We certainly need that. And I want to get to a point where I need to be producing more written material. Sometimes we underestimate that. I mean, the videos are great, but they have a limit to them. The one thing I like about having a pocket track or something like that, it's small. You can stick it in your shirt pocket and walk around with it. You can stand around and you can pass them out anywhere. You can, man, I wrote some tracks. I think I did about 12 tracks years ago. They were just 3 full tracks written on the front and the back. I was trying to think if I had one around somewhere. Very simple, but I would take just a single point basically, and just develop that point in that track, try to give them as much as I could within in that track. Well, people started, purchasing them in bundles, and I gave tons of them away. What amazed me was that some of these tracks made their way all the way to Australia and the UK and other places. And and they were all around. We went to the debate in Montgomery, which is where we met Holger, by the way. Back in 1993, when Jack Scott debated Steve Wiggins, is where we met Holger. And but those tracks had even circulated there. They were all over the country. And that's the beauty of those things. They're inexpensive for the most part. I mean, the biggest thing is just getting them printed. And I would love to sit down and just write, I'd love to write about 100 of them, because I know now, see, back then I didn't have that much information stored. I know I could probably write a good 100 tracks that would be worth reading and very easy for people to put in bundles or purchase, a box of them and then just begin to share them. And wow, can you imagine? I mean, this is how a lot of information got disseminated that causes people to believe what they're believing today. These little tracts that people have. And you would still be amazed. I mean, we're all tech savvy, right? We can use computers, smartphones, and everything, but you'll be surprised at the number of people that still are offline. We got a generation of people who are still not using computers, can't afford them. And then other people, their only computer is their smartphone. So having a little track is still a very viable tool for people to use. So let me see what the comments say. It used to be spelled C. Okay. And then some spelled it with a K instead of a C. Yeah, there you go. So that's how that works. Thank you for doing that. And I have references on it. I just can't keep all that stuff in my head because I don't, unless I review it prior to talking about it. Someone needs to do a preterist Bible, making time words in both. Now, there is a preterist Bible, and I contributed to that. I can't remember the guy's name who headed the project. I don't have a copy of it. The last time I saw the price of it, it was a little pricey. I thought they should reduce the price a little bit, but I mean, I know it took a lot to produce that, But there is a preterist Bible out there, and I did the introduction to the book of Philippians in the preterist Bible that they have. You might want to look that up. If I can find the name of the guy, I will find it and I will put it here. But several of us, did introductions or whatever, made some contributions to that Bible. Okay, I will try to find it. Well, I will find it. I know enough people to to find out who did it because I can't remember the guy's name. And if they're still available, we will make sure that I put the information here so that people can get it. But yes, we need to do some work. We need that kind of work done. It's interesting that I went over to Harding Graduate Library, and the librarian recognized me one day when I was sitting in there doing some research. And he said, "Haven't you written a book?" I said, "Yeah." Oh, here's the amazing thing. I thought this was interesting. We used to write for the Living Presence. I don't know if this stuff is interesting to you at this point. Paul says it is, but I don't know if I'm boring some other people. And if I am, I apologize for that. But, I'm off on the story now. But I walked in the library. I was doing some research, and something caught my eye. I saw something that said Living Presence or whatever. At least I thought it did, because I was walking down the aisles and I wasn't sure. So I went back to take a second look, and right there on the shelf was a hardbound series of volumes of the Living Presence, which was the publication that we did back in 1990 through, I want to say I participated from 1990, I think, through 95 in writing for that journal. And that went all over the world. It was a very good publication for the time. And they have it in the library, in the graduate school library. And I thought, wow, here's some of our work that they, and so he asked me, he says, "Aren't you, he said, haven't you written a book?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I would like to have a copy of it in the library." I said, "Sure." And so I gave him a book, and then I called Don. I said, "Don, would you like to have your books in the Harding Graduate Library?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, send me what you want in there." And he sent me just about everything, a box of them. And so we took everything, every book that I had written, every book that Don wrote, and gave them to the librarian over there. And so there's preterism sitting right there in the library. Who would have thought? I mean, just go figure. It's just an amazing way that God works. Bible prophecy fulfilled, and you will find a preterist Bible. I wonder if that's the one. Do you know who runs that site? Do you have the name? If you pull up the name, I will remember it. I'm vaguely, I've got a name in my head, but I don't know if that's the one. But I'm thinking that that's probably the one. Okay. Now, oh, and speaking of this, now, as a strategy, do you understand how dispensationalism took such deep root? You know, one of the goals and plans of the Zionists was to take over the Christian churches, to have Christian churches teaching Zionism. Well, look at John Hagee and Christine Dart and all the rest of them. Now you can't tell these churches from Judaism because they're teaching it. I mean, you can't tell them from Zionism. They're teaching it. But let me tell you what their effective tool was, since we're talking about Bible. The Schofield Reference Bible, published by Zionists, financed by Zionists. I used to own one. It was one of the first Bibles I bought. That was before I even became a Christian. I didn't even know what it was. And, or shortly after I became, I can't remember which, but I had one. Very expensive Bible for the time, cover and everything. See, the magic of what they did, Gary Parrish. Well, Gary Parrish is certainly one of the people that would have been involved in that process. So definitely. But what they did was they put the comments right in the text along with the Bible, where you have your marginal references, and at the bottom of the text, they wrote their comments in. Now, here's what happened. Michael Day, that's his name. Thank you. Michael Day is the one that I corresponded with in putting that together. And I know they were all involved. But they wrote the comments right in the text. I mean, right in the margins and at the footnotes of the Bible. So here's what people did. They barely read the text. They read the comments. So all their 7 dispensations and all their teachings on dispensationalism was right there in the text, mixed in with the text in terms of the footnotes and the marginal references. And that's how it became such a powerfully influential book. And now you go talk to almost any church out there, and I guarantee you, I think I've mentioned this before, do your own survey. When we did ours, I had the people to just go ask 10 people whether they believed in the rapture, and it came back 7 out of 10 believed, whether they were Christians or not. You know, I told them to kind of note if they believed in the Bible, etc., but that's what they did. Oh yeah, John Nelson Darby, but he wasn't the first. All of them were influenced by Zionism. This has been going on much longer than John Darby. So it's all there, but that's one of the ways that they did it, and why it continues to be influential is because they created a Bible and put these notes in the footnotes, and so people read the footnotes and they just think that that's, you know, the Bible commentary, and they believe it more than they do the scriptures. And without having a knowledge of, you know, the scriptures or how to study the Bible, they get lost in that. Once I realized that it was, you know, I was very young at that time, but once I realized that it was a Zionist Bible and taught dispensationalism, I took the thing and threw it in the garbage because I didn't want anybody else to use it. Now I wish I had it, just because it would have been a very old Bible, but it would have been a good research Bible. I don't even own one to this day. And I just don't feel justified in spending my money to buy one. If I happen to find one somewhere, or, you know, somebody gives it to me, I'm not asking you to send me one. So don't go out and buy me one. But I just refuse to spend my money on it from that perspective. But, you know, I do. That's how much I hated the idea and the concept of what it was. And then as I began to study what came out of the Oxford Bible Society with all of these Zionist authors, etc., that just rewrote stuff and misconstrued stuff, and I mean, all the way from history and everything else to support Zionism. This is where you start getting it. And if you go back and you start studying this, you will see the pattern. You can almost put it together piece by piece and see how this has been an ongoing process and plan, and how they have been infiltrating just about everything that you see. Okay, so she's got a copy, $84, and that's really not bad. I thought at one time it was higher than that, and it may have been, but that's not bad. Oh, you're talking about, yeah, the Schofield Bible was Oxford University Press, correct? That's where a lot of your Zionist material came from. So yes, let me know how you like it, Heavenly Skies. You know, when you get a chance to look it over, tell me what you think about it. And I may just, you know, bite down and go ahead and get a copy of it. I guess I should. I mean, I contributed to the thing. I ought to have a copy. But there you go. So, you know, some good work is being done, and we have to continue that. All right. Well, let's see what's happening here. I've covered a couple of signs, and we've got, after the man of sin, we've got a few more. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. It is now 1:11. We started at 11:30. Well, no, let's just start fresh tomorrow. Let's start fresh. Simon, which argument are you referring to particularly? So I follow you, and are you speaking to me? I'm just trying to follow your comment that you made, Simon. Yeah, well, that's really not a bad price, and hopefully it's a good quality, and it would be well worth that. Well worth that price. Preterism. I think if your argument is from KJV only, it will be stronger. For preterism, you mean? That the King James Version makes a stronger argument for preterism than, say, another translation? Is that what you mean? Okay. Oh, maybe I think what I'm understanding you to say, I think I was missing it. Because so many people trust the King James Version, that if we use that, it would give it more credibility and authority. Is that kind of the point that you're making? Is that what you're saying, Simon? Because I mean, look, in similar, we were taught that the King James Version was inspired. Yes, that's okay. So I finally got your point, and that there is truth to that. I understand, and it's always, if you can start where people start, because they will think if you got a different version that you must be doing something underhanded. They don't understand, and they've been indoctrinated so much about the King James Version that it is, to them, inspired, contains no error, and you got to just be lacking in intelligence and awareness to make that claim. If you know anything about the original language, or make any comparisons, I mean, you'll see that. Or if you know the history, a little bit about history, and you read the book, or you know, the things in the scriptures, you just have to come to that conclusion that some of those things are not correct. And but yeah, I understand that point, and that is, there is validity to that point, because people trust the King James Version, and so they think that's the only Bible. And I can hang with them on the King James Version. I mean, I taught preterism for years before I ever picked up a New King James Version, or any of the other translations, because I've used the American Standard, I've used the New American Standard, and I have other translations. But you know, I learned preterism out of the King James Version. So from as far as reaching people and making them so they won't be uncomfortable with it, that's fine. But you know, I try to help people to understand as best as they can. So, and I only have one, let's see, and it was translated for us to understand. It reads as preterist because I only have one and am preterist. Are you saying you only have one version of the, you only have one King James? There was some very bad translation errors in King James. Yeah, you know, Acts 12:4 is definitely one of them, where they used Easter for Passover. Was the King James translated from the Septuagint? I'm not sure. I think what's used was the Textus Receptus. I used King James, New King James, and Josephus. What is that? Timing statements. Okay. But yeah, the time statements are a big issue in reading the King James, because of sometimes the verb tenses and the word world, which we were talking about yesterday. You know, the confusion that's on the word world. And you know, you listen to people talk about it. Their concept of world is so one-dimensional, they can't understand the difference ideas. Take the word love, 4 words for love in the Greek language. You know, agape, phileo, and storge, and then eros. We use one word in the English for love for the most part, and we don't get the shades of meaning that are expressed there. And the average person is not like those of us who are on this call. The average person is not going to be resourceful enough to get an interlinear, to get a Strong's Concordance, to get a you know, Bible dictionary and other tools, and you know, as I said, interlinear, all those things. They're not going to get them, but they're not even going to have multiple translations that they read from for the most part. I'm talking about the average person now. Those who are above average students, they're definitely going to do it. I get the King James now with no problem by using Hebraism and hyperboles, I guess, and symbolism. But yeah, I mean, it's not impossible to follow and to understand. It's just a little bit difficult in reading for people. And I know this because I deal with people every day reading the Bible. I think it probably contributes to some of the misunderstanding because of the terms that's, you know, the way it's written in that Shakespearean English or whatever that is during that day. It's just a little bit difficult for them to comprehend. One Bible, a King James Version, yet it plainly says things shortly to come to pass, etc. Words like fashion, world just makes you read more to get context. Then it's stronger. They will have a King James. Yeah, I mean, I get your point. I acknowledge that if you can show a person where they are then it's fine. I don't have a problem with studying with people out of the King James Version. I did all of my memory work when I was in seminary from the King James Version. And a lot of times when I start quoting a text, I'm quoting it from the King James Version because that's what I learned. That's kind of funny, Paul. He stole his first Bible. Well, I know I've had a lot of Bibles stolen. I had, new Bibles that I would bring. Sometimes I'd bring extra copies so that other people, that's funny, so that other people would have them, and they would disappear. Maybe you got one of them. I don't know. That's funny. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. So we're going to start tomorrow, and we're going to continue. But I think sometimes it may be good to just kind of look at what some of these other people are saying and then compare that. So I might do a little research, or if you have a video out there that you want me to look at, I'm going to do them in very short clips because we don't want to take a long time, but, just kind of get the sound bite, make sure we get it in context of what they're saying, and just compare some of this stuff so people can see how ridiculous it is, or how unsupported it is from Scripture. Anybody can stay there and sit there and say, here's a sign of the end, and say, because this is happening around us. And I mean, what proof did she give that angels were satellites? And who in their right mind will accept that? Yet we have to sit here and know that that's exactly what's going to happen. People are going to accept that. I mean, when this just kind of blew our mind years ago. This guy, he almost looked like he was dressed like Captain Kangaroo. And he was teaching Bible prophecy on one of these TV programs. And he was quoting Revelation 1:7, where it says, every eye shall see him. And he said, now, that may pose a problem to you because of this world that we live in. And so he says, how are people going to see Christ? How is everybody going to see him? He said, this is how it's going to happen. It's going to be through satellite. So that's how every eye will be able to see Christ coming. And, that's what you get into. So now we got the satellites becoming angels. I'm going to send you a link to your Facebook to go straight to the Preterist Bible, Mr. Dale, so check it after that. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, and there was, Chico was on. I don't know if he's on today, but he said he was having problems reaching me on Facebook yesterday. I gave him the links, but I still didn't see any response from him. So I was just checking to see if he was in here today, but I don't see him. But I put the links there, and I still didn't get a inquiry from him, and just wanted to make that known. All right. Well, look, you guys are just awesome. I think you're just fantastic. Appreciate studying with you and talking with you and conversing every day that we do. And again, I'm always here to try my best to add some value to the discussion. I don't have all the answers. I don't pretend to have all the answers. And I learn a lot from you as well. And I appreciate the comments and the contributions that you make. So I just want to say we're on a journey. We continue to, all right, he's here. All right. Did you try to reach me on yesterday? And just curious. And I know that all the time we don't, because I have intention sometimes of calling people and connecting with them. It took me almost a week to get back to June, and we finally talked on yesterday. So go another 20 minutes. Well, we only have 6 minutes to the end, and to the 2 hours that we allotted. I guess I don't know how much time I allotted, but generally, 2 hours. Here's something I thought about, and let me ask you about this. Now, I'm concerned that people consume the information. So this is just an inquiry. It's just a question. And I know that 2 hours for you is nothing. You're fine with it. And some of you would go longer if we did. All right. A lot of people like to consume things in shorter bites, shorter time frames. So if I were to set up, say, 2 1-hour or 4 30-minute sessions, and then block everything in 30 minutes, and we just go from one to the next. For example, instead of having one straight through, and I'm not talking to the people in radio land, you're going to continue as you are. But for the sake of creating the videos to make them more consumable by people who would be willing to watch a 30-minute video instead of a 2-hour video, that we just go from one to the other. Now that would put a little work on you, because we'd have to, when we end one in 30 minutes, we'd have to click the other one and open it, and then you'd have to join that one. That's just a suggestion, just a thought. I was thinking about it yesterday and wondered what your thoughts are about that. Any feedback on that? You can answer me now, you can answer me later, it doesn't matter. Okay, well, yeah, just keep trying. And like I said, if you go to the Facebook, just, do you have a Facebook profile? Okay, so we got one person that says that could possibly work. And so we could try it. And that way I could just break each, for example, each of these signs down to one point in the video. We do that video, finish that point, and then I put them all in a playlist, so you can just, if you want to listen one after the other, you could do that. All right. And okay, so if you have, put your profile here, and I will contact you and do an ad, and then we can do it that way if you're having problems getting in touch with me. But yeah, so the general public they're looking for something to consume very quickly. They're like going to McDonald's. They want instant hamburgers and something they can do quick. No, they won't be 10 to 15 minutes. I can assure you of that. They're going to be somewhere between 30 minutes to 1 hour. I don't even think 1 hour is bad. That would give us, because I don't, here's the only problem with that is I don't want to interrupt the flow. And if I get into a flow on dealing with the point, then I'm going to keep going until I finish that. But the reason I'm also saying 30 minutes is because we were doing videos for public TV. Cable TV or something, and there was a guy in Hawaii who wanted us to continue to send him videos that were like 30 minutes in length, so that he could take them and put them on this public access TV. And there were millions of people viewing those videos. He would send us reports, in every area, and he was, basically, I know in Chicago and just places around that had large audiences of people. In the hundreds of thousands to millions of people viewing in a particular city or area. And but he needed them all chopped up in 30-minute videos, 29 and a half minutes or 29 minutes, so they would have time to put intros to them, etc. Yeah, and then an hour. So let's think about 2 1-hour shows. Because 30 minutes is almost too much work for me, to be quite frank with you, because I have to set those things up. But maybe 2 1-hour shows, and we'll do that. I mean, it's going to be the same thing. We're just going to be teaching, and we're going to end one an hour and then go right back and click on the other one and start them. So they'll both be set up, and it's just a matter of a mouse click to go into the other. So I will say, let's try it that way for a time and see how that works. It's not going to affect anything on the audio broadcast. We're just going to keep rolling right through, so they won't hear a break, other than the fact that we're just changing gears, so to speak. But for those of you who are viewing, we'll do it this way. Let's see. Okay, I'm a bit new at this, so I ask for your patience. Oh, no problem. No, not a problem at all. We will we'll connect for sure. Now that you've given me your information, I will definitely just friend you on Facebook, and then we will go. All right. So And I agree with you. I mean, you have proven that. Like I said, I had no idea that people, I didn't think I would watch 2-hour videos when I first started watching them, but people made them. And if I wanted the information, I watched a 2.5-hour video last night. I do it now, and it doesn't faze me at all. You know, it used to, because I thought, when I first did my first YouTube videos, see, I also came from having a little bit of internet marketing training. And the most time that business people will watch a video is somewhere between 4 to 6 minutes. So we were taught, do not make a video longer than 6 minutes. So you have to understand the mind shift that I had to go through to go from making, if you look at those first videos that I did, I think they were somewhere within 7 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes, because I was trying to stay within that time frame. And so for me to go from making a 7-minute video to a 30-minute video and then to an hour to 2 hours was a big shift. But I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. So like I said, it's not going to be any different. We're going to be sitting right here, and it's just a mouse click, and we'll be in the next video. All I have to do is just click the mouse, and the next video is started. And so that's the only change that it's going to do for us. And that will give us, we'll just see. I mean, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, we'll be right back to where we are. I've only had one person voice a concern about a 2-hour video since we've been doing them. And that came rather recently, which is kind of why I'm even suggesting this. Other than that, I've had no one complain. I've had more positive comments from people who want to study and love the longer videos. So, I mean, there it is. And I just thought, I'm thinking not in terms of you who are here, I'm thinking more in terms of the people that we're trying to reach. Would they pass up a 2-hour video more quickly than they would pass up a 30-minute to a 1-hour video? And I think that they probably shoot for the shorter term ones. But, again, that's called testing. That's all it's called. It's called testing. And that's all we're going to do is test the process. If it gets too much for me and for you, we're not going to do it. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. And as they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I'm a strong advocate of that principle. So let's see, and we'll just see what happens. So I will do it that way for tomorrow, see how it feels, and see what kind of response we get, and we'll take it from there. Well, with that, we have reached that mark. I want to thank all of you. It's a blast to be here sharing with you and conversing. I never thought that YouTube and doing live sessions could be so much fun, but they've turned out to be fun, and I enjoy it. So the point is also we're very serious about the message that we teach, and even the supplementary things that we get into, we're finding that those are of value to you as well, and that's the way it is. So with that, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. I'm going to go out and try to catch a little bit of this sunshine before it gets away, and just kind of enjoy myself for the rest of the day, and then have to get back to some study later on. But there you have it. And I will do my best to contact you, Chico, and let's see if we can do that right away before we get away from the computer. Because once I get out of here, I won't be back until a little bit later tonight, maybe for dinner time or something, and then get back to some work. All right. Have a good one, everyone. I'm William Bell with All Things Fulfilled. God bless.